My name is Michael Torres, and I have been working as a New York State Park Ranger for 18 years. What happened on Overlook Mountain last October still wakes me up at 3 in the morning. When 5 successful and well-known executives working in Manhattan disappeared just 90 miles from Times Square, we realized that the wilderness is not just about places covered with trees. Before continuing, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. As we continue the story, I want you to understand this very well first. New York is not just skyscrapers and subway stations. If you drive 2 hours north of Manhattan, you'll find yourself in the most unforgiving wilderness of the East Coast. The Catskill Mountains were swallowing people even before the Dutch settled in New Amsterdam. Most New Yorkers don't know this, and they shouldn't. The date was October 13th, 2023, and it was a Friday. Of course, it was the 13th Friday of the month, the unluckiest day. A call came in to the Catskill Regional Office. At the Phoenicia Forest Ranger Station that morning, as I sipped my coffee leisurely while watching the early autumn fog spread through the valleys, the radio suddenly started beeping. Unit 7, this is base. We have a situation at Overlook Mountain. I grabbed the radio. This is Torres, Unit 7, go ahead base. We've got 5 overdue hikers from the city. High priority case, Mike. These aren't your average missing persons. That got my attention. Lisa at dispatch didn't use the term high priority lightly. In 18 years, I'd heard it maybe 3 times. Details? I asked, already grabbing my gear. Group of 5 from Manhattan. They're with Steinberg, Roth, and Associates. I knew that name. Everyone in New York knew that name. It was one of those Wall Street firms with more money than some small countries. Their building had its own subway entrance, for Christ's sake. They were doing some kind of team-building retreat, Lisa continued. Checked in at the Overlook Mountain trailhead yesterday at 2 p.m. They were supposed to be back at their hotel in Woodstock by 6 p.m. for dinner reservations at Cucina. They never showed. Cucina was the kind of place where appetizers cost more than my weekly grocery bill. These people didn't just skip dinner reservations. Weather was clear yesterday, I said, thinking out loud. Overlook Trail is only 5 miles round trip. Even city people in designer hiking boots should manage that in 3 hours. That's what has everyone worried. And Mike, Lisa paused. One of them is David Steinberg. As in the Steinberg and Steinberg, Roth and Associates. Jesus, a missing billionaire 90 miles from Manhattan. This was about to become a circus. I drove to Overlook Mountain on Route 212, passing through Woodstock. Yes, that Woodstock, though the famous festival actually happened in Bethel, 50 miles away. Even at 7 a.m., I could see news vans already gathering at the police station. Word travels fast when Wall Street royalty goes missing. My partner, Amy Chen, was waiting at the trailhead parking lot. Amy had transferred from the NYPD 5 years ago, said she needed to get out of the city after a particularly bad case in the Bronx. She understood both worlds, the concrete jungle and the real one. Media shitstorm incoming, she said by way of greeting, nodding toward a helicopter circling overhead. Channel 4 News, from the look of it. Any sign of their vehicle? I asked. She pointed to a black Cadillac Escalade that probably cost more than I made in 2 years. Rental. Keys were left in a magnetic box under the wheel well. Their phones are inside, which is weird. They left their phones? That was unusual. City people were surgically attached to their phones, especially Wall Street types. All 5 of them, Amy confirmed. Lisa from dispatch said they wanted a digital detox experience. Part of the team-building thing. I looked up at Overlook Mountain. The trail was popular, but not easy. A steady climb of 1,400 feet over 2.5 miles to reach the ruins of the old Overlook Mountain House. a hotel that had burned down in the 1960s. On a clear day, you could see 5 states from the top. On a foggy day like this, you could barely see 50 feet. "Let's check the sign-in log," I suggested. The trailhead register showed their names in neat handwriting. David Steinberg, 52, NYC. Jennifer Wu, 34, NYC. Marcus Johnson, 38, NYC. Rachel Roth, 29, NYC. Bradley Whitman, 41, NYC. Next to their names, someone had written, "Team building. Can't wait to prove Wall Street can conquer mountains too. Hashtag No Phones Friday." Hashtag No Phones Friday, Amy read, shaking her head. Even their trail register entries sound like LinkedIn posts. We started up the trail. The overlook path was wide and well maintained, originally a carriage road from the 1800s. But the fog was thick this morning, turning the familiar forest into something otherworldly. Visibility was maybe 30 feet, and every sound seemed muffled and distorted. About a mile up, we found the first sign something was wrong. A Hermes scarf, the kind that costs 4 figures, was tied around a tree trunk at eye level. It was knotted in a way that looked deliberate, like a trail marker. The pattern was ruined by what looked like blood. "Jennifer Wu's probably," Amy said, checking her notes. The hotel manager mentioned she was wearing designer everything, said she looked like she was dressed for a photo shoot, not a hike. I examined the blood. It was dry, but couldn't have been more than 18 hours old. Not enough blood for a serious injury, but enough to be concerning. We continued up and found more items. A Rolex Submariner hanging from a branch. Men's size, probably Steinberg's or Whitman's. Then a Louis Vuitton wallet, empty, placed precisely in the center of the trail. Each item was positioned deliberately, like breadcrumbs in a fairy tale. "They're leaving us a trail," Amy said. "But why? And why use items worth more than most people's cars?" The fog grew thicker as we climbed. By the time we reached the area near the old hotel ruins, visibility was down to maybe 15 feet. The temperature had dropped too, unusual for October. My breath came out in visible puffs. "Mike," Amy whispered, stopping suddenly. "Listen." I stopped, straining to hear through the fog. At first, just silence. Then I heard it. Singing. Multiple voices, harmonizing perfectly, but the words were wrong. It sounded like a corporate jingle, but twisted somehow. "Climb the ladder, reach the peak. Success is what we always seek, numbers rising, never fall. The mountain market takes it all." The voices seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, echoing off invisible rocks and trees. "David? Jennifer? This is New York State Park Rangers," I called out. "We're here to help." The singing stopped immediately. The silence that followed was absolute. No birds, no wind, no insects. The Catskills were never this quiet, not even in winter. Then, from somewhere in the fog to our left, a voice. Clear, professional, like someone giving a PowerPoint presentation. The quarterly projections indicate significant growth in the vertical market. We're seeing unprecedented returns on our elevation investments. "That sounds like corporate speak for absolutely nothing," Amy muttered. Another voice, female, from our right. "The merger with the mountain has been completed. Shareholders are advised the dissolution of assets is imminent." "Jennifer Wu," I called. "Is that you? We're here to bring you back to safety." Laughter. But not normal laughter. It was synchronized, like 5 people laughing in perfect unison with exactly the same rhythm and pitch. We pushed toward the ruins. The Overlook Mountain House had been a grand hotel once, built in 1871, rebuilt after fires in 1875 and 1924, and finally abandoned after burning for the last time in 1966. Now all that remained were concrete foundations, stone walls, and graffiti from decades of hikers. In the fog, the ruins looked like the bones of some massive creature. That's where we found them. All 5 were standing in a perfect line at the eastern overlook point, facing the foggy void where, on a clear day, you could see the Hudson Valley spread out like a map. They were still in their expensive hiking gear, Arc'teryx jackets, Salomon boots, designer backpacks. But something was fundamentally wrong. They stood with identical posture, backs straight, heads tilted at exactly the same angle, arms at their sides with fingers spread in the same position, like mannequins arranged by an obsessive window dresser. Mr. Steinberg? I approached slowly. I'm Ranger Torres. We're here to help you. All 5 heads turned toward me in perfect synchronization. Same speed, same angle, same blank expression. Their eyes were open but unfocused, pupils dilated despite the gray morning light. The summit meeting has concluded, they said in unison, their voices creating an unsettling harmony. Returns have been maximized. The portfolio has been optimized for vertical integration. Amy had her hand on her radio, ready to call for backup. I held up a hand, telling her to wait. We need to get you all back down the mountain, I said, keeping my voice calm and steady. There are people worried about you. Your families, your company. The company has been acquired, they responded together. All assets have been absorbed. The mountain market never closes. David Steinberg, the billionaire whose face graced Fortune magazine covers, suddenly broke from the line. But his movement was wrong. Too fluid, like his joints had been replaced with something more flexible. He approached me with that same blank expression. You should invest, he said. But his voice was layered now, as if multiple people were speaking through him. The returns are infinite. The climb never ends. Join the vertical integration. He reached out toward me and I saw his hand. The fingers were too long. I'm not talking about a subtle difference. His fingers had gained at least 2 inches, with what looked like an extra joint. The skin was stretched tight, showing every vein and tendon underneath. David, what happened to your hand? I asked, backing away. He looked down at his elongated fingers with mild interest, like examining a spreadsheet. Optimization for climbing. Better grip on market opportunities. Would you like to see the prospectus? Behind him, the others began to move, not walking, undulating. Their bodies moved like liquid while maintaining their standing position, drifting across the stone ruins without taking actual steps. Jennifer Wu's neck had elongated, allowing her head to turn almost completely backward while her body faced forward. Marcus Johnson's arms hung down past his knees, the sleeves of his expensive jacket torn where they'd grown too long. Amy, call for backup, I said quietly. Medical team, state police, everyone. Mike, Amy's voice was tight. Look at the ruins. I looked where she was pointing, the graffiti on the walls, decades of tags, names, and dates left by hikers, was moving. Not the paint itself, but something behind it, like the stone was breathing. The dates were changing, rearranging themselves into stock tickers and market graphs. Names morphed into corporate logos that didn't exist. The merger is proceeding as planned, the 5 executives said in their horrible harmony. The old hotel burned, but the company is eternal. Overhead is eliminated when you become the mountain itself. Rachel Roth, the youngest of them, suddenly snapped her head toward us. Her face was still blank, but tears were streaming down her cheeks. Help, she whispered, just her voice this time, not the group's. It's in the stone. In the mountain, it's been waiting since the hotel burned. It feeds on ambition. It makes us climb. We can't stop climbing. Even standing still, we're climbing. The synchronized voice returned, drowning out Rachel's plea. The elevator only goes up. The market only rises. Growth is eternal. Join the ascent. The fog swirled around them, and for a moment I saw something else. Behind each of them, like shadows that didn't match their bodies, were tall, impossibly thin figures. They had too many angles, like someone had tried to draw a human from memory but kept adding joints and segments. These shadow things had their hands, if you could call them hands, inserted into the backs of the executives like puppeteers. The old guests never left, Jennifer Wu said, and for a second her real voice broke through. The fire didn't kill them. It freed them. They went into the mountain, and now they need new bodies to check out. The helicopter overhead grew louder, and I heard vehicles arriving at the trailhead far below. Backup was coming, but as the sound of civilization approached, the 5 executives began to back away, moving toward the cliff edge. No! I lunged forward, trying to grab David Steinberg. My hand passed right through him, not like he was a ghost, more like he was there, but not there, existing in a space slightly adjacent to ours. All 5 of them were becoming translucent, their expensive hiking gear the only solid-looking things about them. The meeting is adjourned, they said in unison. But the conference continues. The summit is not a place, but a process. We'll send you the minutes. They stepped backward off the cliff, all 5 at once. Amy and I rushed to the edge expecting to see bodies falling or crashed below. Instead, we saw them descending the cliff face, their elongated limbs finding handholds that shouldn't exist, moving down the vertical rock like spiders. They disappeared into the fog within seconds. The search that followed was massive. State police, FBI, 3 helicopter teams, K-9 units, even Army Rangers from West Point. We combed every inch of Overlook Mountain and the surrounding wilderness. We found their expensive gear scattered throughout the forest. Watches, jewelry, designer clothes, arranged in patterns that looked like financial charts when viewed from above. But we never found the 5 executives. Not their bodies, anyway. 3 days into the search, something else happened. The Steinberg, Roth, and Associates building in Manhattan, all 43 floors of it, was found empty on a Monday morning. Not just absent of people, but empty. Every computer, every desk, every piece of paper, even the office plants, gone. The security footage showed nothing unusual. 1 frame, everything was normal. The next frame, empty floors. But the elevators kept running. Up and down, stopping at floors, doors opening and closing for passengers who weren't there. The building management shut them down, but they kept running anyway, even with the power cut. The media frenzy was exactly what you'd expect when 5 Wall Street executives vanish into thin air. CNN ran 24-hour coverage. The New York Post's headline screamed, "Peak performance. Billionaires vanish on mountain." Fox News somehow blamed it on regulations. The conspiracy theorists had a field day. Everything from alien abduction to elaborate scheme to escape federal investigation. But Amy and I knew the truth was worse than any theory. 3 weeks after the disappearance, I was called to the Bronx. Yes, the Bronx, about as far from mountain wilderness as you could get while still being in New York State. The NYPD had requested me specifically, which was unusual. City cops didn't typically want state park rangers on their turf. Detective Maria Santos met me outside a rundown apartment building on Grand Concourse. She looked exhausted, the kind of tired that comes from seeing something that doesn't fit into your understanding of the world. "Thanks for coming, Torres," she said, skipping pleasantries. "When I heard you were the ranger from the Overlook Mountain case, I knew you needed to see this. What's a missing person case from the Catskills got to do with the Bronx?" I asked. "That's just it. They're not missing anymore. One of them is here, sort of." She led me up 5 flights of stairs that reeked of urine and mold. The building was the kind where half the apartments were abandoned, where even the rats had better places to be. We stopped at apartment 5F. Landlord called it in, Santos explained. Said he heard what sounded like a business meeting at 3 a.m. from an apartment that's been empty for 6 years. She opened the door, and I immediately understood why she'd called me. The abandoned apartment had been transformed into a perfect replica of a corporate boardroom. Not just any boardroom, I recognized it from photos. This was the executive conference room from the 43rd floor of the Steinberg, Roth, and Associates building. Every detail was exact, from the Italian marble table to the Herman Miller chairs, to the view of Manhattan through the windows. Except the windows were painted on the walls, painted so realistically that my brain kept trying to perceive depth that wasn't there. And in those painted windows, the city moved. Traffic flowed, lights blinked, tiny painted figures walked on painted streets far below. Sitting at the head of the table was Jennifer Wu, or something wearing Jennifer Wu's face. She was dressed in the same hiking outfit from 3 weeks ago, but it was pristine, like it had just come from the store. Her skin had a waxy quality, like a mannequin that had been brought almost to life. She was in the middle of a presentation, gesturing at charts that materialized in the air, actual floating graphs made of light and shadow. As you can see from these projections, she said to the empty chairs, the vertical integration has exceeded all expectations. We're seeing returns that technically shouldn't be possible under the current laws of physics, but we've found a workaround. Jennifer, I said carefully. She turned to me with that same synchronized movement I'd seen on the mountain. Her smile was perfect, corporate, empty. Mr. Torres, how wonderful of you to join us. Please, take a seat. We're just discussing the Q4 earnings. The mountain division has been particularly profitable. Jennifer, where are the others? Where are David, Marcus, Rachel, and Bradley? They're attending other meetings, she said, gesturing to the empty chairs. But as she gestured, I saw them. Translucent figures sitting in each chair, going through the motions of taking notes, nodding, checking phones that weren't there. The distributed meeting model is very efficient, Jennifer continued. We can be in multiple locations simultaneously. Would you like to see our expansion plans? She waved her hand, and the painted windows changed. Instead of Manhattan, they showed Overlook Mountain, but not as it was now, as it was in 1920, with the grand Overlook Mountain House Hotel standing proud against the sky. The hotel that had burned 3 times, finally consumed completely in 1966. It never really left, you know, Jennifer said, her voice taking on a dreamy quality. The hotel. It just changed states, from solid to distributed, from matter to management. The fire was a hostile takeover. The mountain itself was the acquiring entity. Jennifer, you need help. Let me take you to a hospital. She laughed, that same synchronized laugh from the mountain, even though she was alone. Hospitals are for bodies, Mr. Torres. We're beyond that now. We're incorporated in the truest sense. Would you like to see? Before I could respond, she stood and walked to one of the painted windows. Then she walked through it. Not through the wall, into the painting. She became 2-dimensional, a figure in the painted cityscape, walking down the painted street, getting smaller with perspective until she disappeared around a painted corner. Detective Santos, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. That's not even the weirdest part. Show him the basement. The basement of the building was supposed to be storage and utilities. Instead, we found another impossibility. The concrete floor had been transformed into forest floor. Actual dirt, leaves, and tree roots, but growing down from the ceiling. Upside-down trees stretched towards the floor, their inverted root system spreading across what should have been the ceiling. In the center was an elevator, a perfect replica of the ones from the Steinberg building, all brass and mirrors and expensive wood paneling. The display showed it was on floor -43, -43. It arrived 3 days ago, Santos said. Just appeared, the morning after Jennifer showed up. It runs constantly, but the doors won't open. We can hear it moving, but the shaft doesn't connect to anything. It just goes down into solid concrete and up into solid concrete. I approached the elevator. Through the crack between the doors, I could hear music. The same corporate jingle the executives had been singing on the mountain, but played on what sounded like a hotel lobby piano. "Has anyone else come out?" I asked. "Not yet." But every night at 3 a.m., we hear meetings in different abandoned apartments. Business conversations, presentations, conference calls. The sounds move around the building like they're following some kind of schedule. And Mr. Torres, this isn't the only building. She handed me a folder. Reports from all 5 boroughs. Abandoned buildings suddenly hosting invisible business meetings. Elevator shafts appearing in structures that never had elevators. And in 3 cases, security cameras catching glimpses of the other missing executives, always walking through walls, always attending meetings that existed somewhere between real and not real. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what Jennifer had said. The hotel never left. It just changed states. At 2 a.m., I gave up and drove back to the Catskills, to Overlook Mountain. The trailhead was supposed to be closed, wrapped in police tape after the incident. But there were cars in the parking lot. Expensive cars. Mercedes, BMWs, Teslas, even a Bentley. At least a dozen of them. I called Amy. "Get to Overlook Mountain. Bring backup. Something's happening." I didn't wait. I started up the trail with my flashlight and immediately saw them. Professionals in business suits hiking up the mountain path. Men and women in expensive clothes completely inappropriate for hiking, walking with that same synchronized gait I'd seen in the executives. "Excuse me," I called to one of them, a woman in Louboutins navigating the rocky trail like she was walking on flat carpet. "The trail is closed." She turned to me with a bright, empty smile. "The summit meeting has been called. Attendance is mandatory for all stakeholders." "What meeting? Who called it?" "The hotel, of course. It's the quarterly earnings review. The mountain division has exceeded projections. We're all getting promotions. More people passed us, streaming up the trail. I recognize some of them from newspaper photos. CEOs, hedge fund managers, tech entrepreneurs, all walking with that same unnatural synchronization, all heading up the mountain in the dark. I followed them, calling Amy again. It's not just 5 missing people anymore. There are dozens heading up the mountain, all corporate types. "Mike, get out of there. Wait for backup." But I couldn't. I had to know what was happening. At the ruins of the Overlook Mountain House, the scene defied reality. The hotel was there. Not rebuilt, there as if it had never burned. But it existed in layers, like multiple exposures on old film. I could see it as it was in 1871, 1924, and 1966, all simultaneously. Solid and destroyed, standing and fallen, occupied and abandoned, all at once. The business people were checking in at a front desk that was both there and not there, signing a register with pens that existed only when they held them. Behind the desk stood David Steinberg, or the thing that used to be him. His body had stretched to fit the role, literally 7 feet tall now, thin as a rail, with arms that could reach any drawer or key without moving. "Welcome to the Overlook Mountain House," he said to each arrival. "Your room is on floor infinity. The elevator is always ascending." I watched in horror as the new arrivals walked into the hotel that wasn't there. disappearing into walls that were simultaneously standing and long since fallen. But I could still hear them, conversations from dozens of rooms that had burned decades ago. The clink of glasses from a bar that was now just scorched stones, a piano playing in a lounge that existed only in the overlap between what was and what wasn't. Rachel Roth appeared beside me. Not suddenly, she was just there, as if she'd always been standing next to me. Her body hadn't changed as dramatically as the others, but her eyes were ancient, tired, filled with the weight of seeing too many realities at once. "You should leave, Ranger Torres," she said quietly. "The hostile takeover is almost complete." "Rachel, what is this? What's happening?" "The hotel never accepted its destruction," she explained, her voice distant. "When it burned the final time, it made a deal. It would become part of the mountain, and the mountain would become part of the market. Growth without matter. Expansion without space. It feeds on ambition, on the need to always climb higher, to always get more returns." But it needed bodies? It needed management. The mountain knew how to be ancient and patient. The hotel knew how to be grand and profitable, but neither knew how to be corporate. How to expand infinitely, to consume without eating, to grow without size. That's what we brought to the merger. Behind her, I saw Marcus Johnson at what had once been the Eastern Overlook. He was giving a presentation to a group of new arrivals, pointing at charts that hung in the air. But the charts weren't showing financial data. They were showing the mountain itself growing, spreading, the infection of corporate structure extending like veins through the stone. "It's not staying here," Rachel continued. "Every one of these new executives, they're like spores. They'll go back to the city, back to their buildings, and they'll spread it. Elevators that go to floors that don't exist. Meetings that happen in no space. The endless climb to a summit that keeps getting higher. How do we stop it?" She laughed, but it was her laugh, not the synchronized one. There was sadness in it. "Stop it? Mr. Torres, you can't stop a merger that's already been approved by the board. The contracts have been signed in smoke and stone. The hotel that burned is the hotel that stands. We are the staff and the guests, the owners and the owned." A sound like thunder rolled through the ruins, but it wasn't from the sky. The mountain itself was adjusting, reshaping. I felt the ground shift under my feet, and suddenly the trail I'd climbed 1,000 times was different. Longer. It stretched below me for miles, impossibly far. The parking lot just a distant point of light. "The mountain is growing," Rachel said. "Not physically, conceptually. The climb becomes longer the more you need to reach the top. And everyone needs to reach the top, don't they? That's what ambition is." Amy's voice crackled through my radio. "Mike, where are you? We're at the ruins, but we can't see you." I was standing right where I'd always been, but I understood. I was in the ruins that were, while Amy was in the ruins that are. The hotel had separated the timelines, creating pockets of then and now, letting them exist separately and together. "Amy, don't come up here," I radioed back. It's complicated." But even as I spoke, I saw her, not my Amy, but an Amy, checking into the hotel, signing the register, smiling that empty corporate smile. She was wearing a business suit I'd never seen her in, accepting a room key from David Steinberg. "Your meeting is on floor 73, he told her. "The elevator is right this way." "No." I ran toward her, but passed through her like she was mist. Or, like I was mist, we were in different layers of the same space, different versions of the same moment. Bradley Whitman appeared at what was once the hotel bar, now just a stone foundation but also a fully stocked bar, with crystal glasses and top-shelf liquor. He was serving drinks to the new arrivals, each cocktail smoking with fog that rose and became part of the mountain mist. "The special tonight is our vertical integration," he announced. "One sip and you'll understand the true meaning of upward mobility." The executives drank eagerly, and as they did, I watched them change. Subtle at first, a lengthening of fingers, a flexibility in joints that shouldn't flex. Then more dramatic, spines extending, allowing them to stand taller, to reach higher, to always be climbing even when standing still. I need to tell you what happened next, but first you need to understand something about mountains. They're not just rock and dirt pushed up by tectonic forces. Mountains are ideas as much as they are objects. They represent challenge, achievement, the pinnacle of earthly ambition. Every culture that has ever existed near mountains has mythologized them. Gods live on mountains. Moses received the commandments on a mountain. The Greeks put their pantheon on Olympus. Overlook Mountain had become something else entirely. It had weaponized that mythology, turned it into a corporate structure that existed between the physical and the conceptual. I stood in the ruins that were also a hotel, watching Amy, who wasn't Amy, check into her room. The real Amy was still somewhere in the real ruins, calling for me on the radio, but her voice was getting fainter, like she was moving away even though neither of us was moving at all. "Mr. Torres." Jennifer Wu stood beside me, looking more solid than she had in the Bronx apartment. She'd changed clothes, now wearing a period-appropriate 1920s dress, the kind the original Overlook Mountain House guests would have worn. But it kept flickering to her hiking gear, then to a modern business suit, then back to the dress, like she couldn't decide which era to exist in. "You're seeing it now, aren't you?" she said. "The hostile takeover. The mountain took the hotel took us, and now we're taking everything else. This is insane," I said. "You can't just merge reality with corporate structure." She laughed, and for once it was just her laugh, not the synchronized one. "Can't we?" "What do you think corporations are, Mr. Torres? They're fictional entities that we all agree to treat as real. Legal persons that exist only on paper and in our collective agreement that they exist. The mountain just found a way to leverage that fiction into something more tangible." She gestured to the scene around us. More executives were arriving every minute, checking into a hotel that had been destroyed in 1966. Each one signed the register and received a room on a floor that couldn't exist. Floor 73, floor 99, floor 147. The hotel grew upward with each check-in, adding floors that existed in no space, reaching toward a sky that was simultaneously 1871, 1924, 1966, and 2023. "But why?" I asked. "What's the point?" "Growth," Marcus Johnson said, appearing at the bar. His body had adapted further. His torso had elongated to accommodate extra organs I couldn't identify, visible through his translucent skin. "Eternal growth, that's what the market demands, isn't it? Always up, never down, always more, never less. The mountain found the perfect partners in us." He poured a drink from a bottle that was both full and empty, both there and not there. The liquid was like captured fog, swirling with colors that shouldn't exist. "The hotel that burned was limited by physical space," he continued. "It could only have so many rooms, so many guests. But a hotel that exists between states, it can have infinite rooms on infinite floors, and every guest who checks in becomes part of the structure. We're not just staying in the hotel, we are the hotel." I watched in horror as one of the new arrivals, a hedge fund manager I recognized from CNBC, walked into an elevator that shouldn't exist. The doors closed, and I could see through the walls as it rose. Not through the mountain, but through dimensions, passing through layers of reality like floors in a building. At each floor, he became less human and more structural, his body stretching and flattening until he was just another floor in the infinite hotel. "Stop this!" I shouted. "People are dying!" "Dying?" Rachel Roth emerged from a wall, her expression sad but resigned. "No one's dying, Mr. Torres. We're being promoted, elevated, integrated vertically into something larger than ourselves." She held out her hand, and in it was a business card. But the card kept changing. My name, her name, David Steinberg's name. Names I didn't recognize. The title kept shifting, too. Park Ranger, Account Executive, Hotel Manager, Mountain itself. "Take it," she urged. "Join the structure. The alternative is worse." "What alternative?" She pointed to the eastern overlook, where the fog was clearing. In the distance, I could see Manhattan's skyline. But it was wrong. The buildings were growing, stretching upward like plants seeking sunlight. The Empire State Building had doubled in height, adding floors that existed in the same impossible space as the Overlook Mountain House. The New World Trade Center was splitting into multiple versions of itself, each slightly out of phase with the others. "It's not just here," Rachel said. "Every ambitious place, every structure built to reach higher, to dominate the skyline, they're all joining the merger. The concept of up itself is being incorporated." My radio crackled one more time. Amy's voice, but distant, distorted. "Mike, something's wrong. The trail, it goes up forever. We can't find the way down." I tried to respond, but my radio was dead. Or maybe it was just speaking to a different timeline now, a different version of the mountain where Amy and the backup were climbing eternally, always approaching the summit, but never reaching it. David Steinberg appeared at the check-in desk, but now he wasn't alone. There were dozens of him, all slightly different, all checking in guests simultaneously. Some versions were from the past. A younger Steinberg from his first IPO, a child Steinberg with a lemonade stand and ambition in his eyes. Others were from futures that might have been, an elderly Steinberg who never disappeared, a Steinberg who had chosen teaching over finance. "The merger includes all possible versions," the Steinberg said in unison. "Every path to the top, every route to success. We are all checking in. We have always been checking in. We will always be checking in." A wind rose from nowhere, carrying the smell of smoke. Not wood smoke, but the acrid smell of burning ambition, of dreams consumed by their own intensity. The hotel began to burn, but it was also not burning, also already burned, also never burned. The fire existed in all states simultaneously, consuming and creating, destroying and building. "You have to choose, Mr. Torres," Jennifer Wu said, her dress now made of flame that didn't burn. "Join the structure or be consumed by it. There's no walking away from the mountain once you've seen what it really is." I looked around at the impossible scene. The executives had all transformed now, their bodies adapted for eternal climbing. Some had developed extra limbs, all the better to grasp the next rung. Others had stretched vertically, becoming ladder-like themselves, allowing others to climb them. They were human resources in the most literal sense, but in the midst of all this corporate horror, I noticed something. The trees around the ruins were unchanged. The actual stone foundations, the parts that had truly survived the fire, were still just stone. The mountain itself, the actual rock and dirt and trees, wasn't part of this. It was just the idea of the mountain, the concept of climbing, that had been corrupted. "No," I said. Jennifer tilted her head, that bird-like movement the changed ones all did. "No, I choose number. I don't choose to join, and I don't choose to be consumed. I choose to just be here, on the actual mountain, the real one. There is no real mountain anymore. Marcus said from the bar. Reality has been acquired. Existence has been merged. You can't stand on ground that's been incorporated into something else. But I could. I focused on the feeling of actual dirt under my boots, the real weight of my pack, the true sensation of altitude in my lungs. I thought about every real hike I'd ever taken, every actual tree I'd identified, every genuine moment of wilderness I'd experienced in 18 years as a ranger. The hotel flickered around me. "What are you doing?" Rachel asked, alarmed. "My job," I said. "I'm a park ranger. I protect the wilderness. And this?" I gestured at the corporate nightmare around us. "This isn't wilderness. It's the opposite of wilderness. It's the most artificial thing I've ever seen." I pulled out my ranger's notebook, not to take notes, but to ground myself. This was real. The pages were real. The pencil was real. I started sketching the actual ruins as I knew them, as they really were. Stone foundations, graffiti from decades of hikers, the actual view from the actual mountain. The hotel began to shake. "Stop!" David Steinberg, all of him, commanded. "You're disrupting the merger." "Good," I said, continuing to sketch. "Because mergers can be blocked. Hostile takeovers can be resisted. And corporations, they only exist because we agree they do." I drew the trail as it really was, 2.5 miles, not infinite. I sketched the parking lot at its actual distance, not impossibly far. I mapped the real peaks visible from the real summit: Slide Mountain, Hunter Mountain, Black Dome. Real places with real names, not corporate divisions with quarterly projections. The hotel was fragmenting, its multiple timelines separating. The 1871 version split from the 1924 version split from the 1966 version. The executives were being pulled in different directions, their synchronized movements falling apart. "You don't understand," Jennifer Wu cried, her form flickering rapidly between all her versions. "Without the structure, we'll fall apart. We've been changed too much to exist without incorporation." She was right. As the hotel dissolved, I saw what they really were now. Not humans anymore, but not fully corporate entities either. They were caught between states, unable to exist in either. Their elongated limbs couldn't support them in normal gravity. Their stretched spines couldn't hold them upright without the conceptual framework of eternal climbing. Bradley Whitman at the bar was the first to collapse. Without the impossible hotel to give him context, he was just a man whose body had been restructured for a reality that was ceasing to exist. He folded in on himself, his extra joints working against each other, his extended fingers grasping at nothing. "Please," Rachel begged, the only one still maintaining some human form, "don't destroy us. We didn't know. We just wanted to succeed. We just wanted to climb higher." I felt a pang of sympathy, but I couldn't stop. The real mountain needed to be protected, even from the ambitions of those who would climb it. But then something unexpected happened. The actual mountain, the real physical Overlook Mountain, responded. Not the corrupted concept, but the genuine article. I felt it through my boots, a deep rumbling that had nothing to do with corporate mergers and everything to do with geological time. The mountain had been here before the hotel. It had been here before humans. It would be here long after corporations were forgotten concepts. And it had its own opinion about what was happening on its peak. The stone foundations of the ruins began to glow, not with corporate lighting but with a deeper, older light. The light of deep time, of tectonic patience, of geological memory. The mountain was reclaiming itself. "The original contract," Rachel gasped, understanding before the others. Before the hotel, before us, there was an older agreement. She was right. I could feel it now, thrumming through the stone. The Lenape people had been here first. They had their own relationship with the mountain, their own understanding of its power. And that understanding was far older and more powerful than any corporate structure. The light from the foundations grew brighter, and in it, I saw figures. Not ghosts, but memories held in stone. The indigenous people who had first named this place, who had understood that some heights weren't meant to be conquered but respected. They had known the mountain's true nature, not as something to be climbed and dominated, but as something to coexist with. The corporate structure was being overwritten by this older, truer structure. The executives were changing again, but differently this time. Their impossibly elongated forms were compressing, returning to something more human. But they couldn't go all the way back. They'd been changed too fundamentally. "We can offer you a different merger," a voice said. Not from any of the executives, but from the mountain itself, speaking through the stone and wind. Not incorporation, but integration. Not climbing over, but becoming part of. David Steinberg was the first to understand. The multiple versions of him collapsed into one. Not his original self, but not the corporate horror either. Something in between. He looked at his hands, no longer impossibly elongated, but not quite normal either. They were hands that could climb, but also hands that could rest. "We become part of the mountain," he said slowly. "Not to conquer it, but to protect it." "Rangers," I said, understanding hitting me. "You become rangers. Not park rangers, but something else. Guardians of the balance between ambition and reality." The transformation wasn't instant. Nothing real ever is. As dawn broke over the Catskills, the real dawn, not the temporal confusion of the hotel's multiple timelines, the 5 executives stood in the actual ruins of the Overlook Mountain house. They were changed, permanently, but no longer the corporate monstrosities they'd been becoming. Their bodies had found a middle ground between human and something else. Jennifer Wu's fingers were still too long, but now they looked purposeful, like a rock climber's hands evolved for grip. Her neck, which had been grotesquely extended, had settled into something that gave her increased range of vision, useful for watching the trails. She looked at me with eyes that held both her original intelligence and something older, more patient. "I can feel it," she said, her voice no longer layered but carrying harmonics of wind and stone. "Every footstep on the mountain, every person climbing. Their ambitions, their dreams, their need to reach the top." Marcus Johnson nodded. His arms, which had grown past his knees, had restructured into something more proportional but undeniably powerful. "We're the filter now, the mountain's immune system against what we almost became." David Steinberg was examining his reflection in a puddle of morning dew. He looked like himself, but stretched, like someone had pulled him vertically and he'd retained the height. At 7.5 feet tall now, he cut an imposing figure, but his expression was thoughtful rather than dominating. "The stock market opens in 3 hours," he said. "Steinberg, Roth, and Associates is gone, but the structures we set in motion, they're still out there. The infection we started in Manhattan, he was right. Through my connection to the mountain, and I had a connection now whether I wanted it or not, I could feel the disturbance spreading through New York City. Buildings growing taller in impossible ways, elevators accessing floors that shouldn't exist, meetings happening in spaces between spaces. The vertical integration was continuing without them. "We have to go back," Rachel said. She'd changed the least physically, but her eyes held depths that hadn't been there before, like looking into a well that reflected stars even in daylight. "We started this, we have to help end it." Bradley Whitman laughed, but it was bitter. Of all of them, he'd fought the transformation the hardest and bore the most dramatic changes. His spine had developed additional curves that allowed him to move in ways that seemed to defy physics, flowing over rocks and through spaces like liquid while maintaining solid form. Go back? Looking like this? We're freaks now, monsters. They'll lock us up or dissect us. No, I said. They'll need you. Amy, can you hear me now? My radio crackled to life. Amy's voice, clear and real. Mike? Jesus, where have you been? You've been standing in the ruins for 6 hours, not responding to anything. And are those the missing executives with you? It's complicated, I said. We're coming down. Call the state police, the FBI, everyone. But tell them we found the solution to the Manhattan problem. The hike down was surreal. The trail was just a trail again, 2.5 miles of well-worn path. But I could see how the executives, the former executives, experienced it differently. They moved with inhuman grace, their altered bodies perfectly adapted for mountain terrain. But more than that, they were connected to everyone on the mountain, everyone who had ever climbed it, everyone who ever would. There, Jennifer said, pointing to a family of hikers heading up as we descended. The father is pushing too hard. He wants to prove something to his kids, but he's got a heart condition he's hiding. Without seeming to move unnaturally fast, she was suddenly beside them, engaging them in conversation, suggesting they take a break to enjoy the view. The father, who'd been red-faced and breathing hard, gratefully accepted the excuse to rest. How did you know? I asked. The mountain knows everyone who climbs it, she replied. And now we're part of the mountain. At the parking lot, chaos awaited. News vans, police cars, federal vehicles. The media went insane when they saw the 5 executives walking out of the woods, clearly changed but undeniably alive. But before the screaming questions could start, something else happened. Every screen, every phone, tablet, laptop, and camera display suddenly showed the same thing. The interior of an elevator rising smoothly, the floor counter climbing past reasonable numbers. 100, 200, 500, 1,000. It's happening, David said. The vertical integration is reaching critical mass. A reporter shoved a microphone at him. Mr. Steinberg, where have you been? What happened to you? Is this some kind of publicity stunt? David looked at the reporter, then at the camera, and I saw him make a decision. What happened to us is what's happening to the city right now, he said, his voice carrying that strange harmonic that made people stop and listen. We discovered something in these mountains, something that feeds on ambition, on the need to always climb higher. We became part of it, and now it's spreading. Are you saying there's some kind of creature? The reporter asked, skeptical but intrigued. Not a creature, Marcus stepped forward. A concept that became real. The idea of eternal growth, of always needing to reach higher, of success without limits. It's what drove us to the top of the corporate world, and it's what's now driving buildings to grow beyond their foundations, elevators to reach floors that don't exist. The FBI agent in charge, a woman named Director Cole, pushed through the crowd. Mr. Steinberg, you and your colleagues need to come with us. There are questions. There's no time for questions, Rachel interrupted. She pulled out her phone. Somehow, she still had it, and showed the screen. It displayed a feed from a traffic camera in Manhattan. The Steinberg, Roth, and Associates building was visibly growing, adding floors in real time, pushing up into the sky. Other buildings were doing the same, their tops disappearing into clouds that shouldn't be there. Every ambitious person in the city is being affected, Rachel explained. They're being drawn to climb higher, to reach floors that exist outside normal space. Once they enter those floors, they become part of the structure, just like we almost did. Director Cole looked at the screen, then at the transformed executives. "And you can stop this?" "We can try," David said. "We understand it now. We've been on both sides, the climbers and the mountain. We can teach others to resist, to find balance." "Balance," Bradley laughed again, that bitter sound. "That's rich, coming from us. We were the most unbalanced people in the city." "Exactly," Jennifer said. "Which is why we're the only ones who can help. We know what drives the climbing. We know the hunger that feeds it." The ride back to Manhattan was surreal. We took helicopters. The FBI wasn't taking any chances with ground transport when roads might suddenly develop vertical dimensions. As we flew over the city, the extent of the situation became clear. Manhattan's skyline had gone insane. Buildings stretched impossibly tall, their tops lost in clouds that existed at wrong altitudes. The Empire State Building had developed multiple spires, each one reaching in slightly different directions, as if trying to climb different skies. The New World Trade Center was splitting and rejoining with itself, creating a twisted DNA helix of steel and glass. "Central Park," Rachel pointed out the window. "Look." Central Park was the only unchanged space, a rectangle of normalcy in a city going vertical. The trees, the grass, the lakes, all remained stubbornly horizontal, refusing to join the upward integration. "Nature resists," I said, understanding. "The actual, physical world resists the corporate overlay." "Then that's where we start," David said. We landed in Central Park, in the sheep meadow. It was packed with people who'd fled the infected buildings, thousands of New Yorkers standing on actual grass, touching actual trees, grounding themselves in physical reality. But even here, the infection was trying to spread. I could see it in the way some people stood, their bodies beginning to elongate, their eyes focused on heights that didn't exist. The need to climb, to succeed, to reach higher was so ingrained in the city's DNA that even natural space couldn't fully counter it. The 5 executives spread out, moving through the crowd. They were frightening to look at, their transformed bodies impossible to ignore, but something about them made people listen. "Feel the ground," Jennifer was telling a group of Wall Street traders. "Remember that the earth is flat here. Success doesn't have to mean height." Marcus was with a cluster of tech entrepreneurs, his elongated arms gesturing in ways that seemed to hypnotize. "The climb never ends if you let it define you. But you can choose to stop, to rest, to be." David had found a news crew and was speaking directly to the camera, his message broadcasting across the city. "This is David Steinberg. I know you all thought I was dead or missing. I was something worse. I was promoted beyond humanity. The buildings growing around you, the floors that shouldn't exist, they're offering you the same promotion. Don't take it. Stay human. Stay grounded." But it wasn't enough. The buildings kept growing. More people were being drawn into the impossible elevators, rising to floors that existed outside normal space-time. That's when Rachel had an idea. "The hotel," she said to me. "The Overlook Mountain House. It burned 3 times but kept being rebuilt. It never accepted its ending. So maybe that's the solution. Not fighting the vertical integration, but giving it what it really wants, an ending, closure." She gathered the others, and they formed a circle in the middle of Sheep Meadow. They joined hands, their transformed hands, some with too many fingers, some with not enough joints, all wrong but functionally perfect. "We're going to burn it," David announced. "Not the buildings, but the concept. The idea that growth must be eternal, that success has no summit. They began to speak in unison, but not the horrible corporate harmony from before. This was different. 5 voices finding natural harmony, like a chord resolving. They spoke about their careers, their ambitions, their crimes in the name of profit. They confessed to the crowd, to the cameras, to the city itself. I destroyed 3 companies for a percentage point of growth, David said. I laid off thousands to boost quarterly earnings, Marcus admitted. I sold products I knew were harmful because the margins were good, Jennifer added. I manipulated markets, destroyed retirements, ruined lives, Bradley continued. We climbed on the backs of others and called it success, Rachel concluded. As they spoke, something began to happen. The impossibly tall buildings started to shudder. The phantom floors flickered. The elevators that went nowhere stopped their eternal rise. We burn it all, they said together. The hunger, the ambition, the need to always have more. We burn it with truth. Fire appeared. Not real fire, but something that looked like flame made of pure honesty. It spread from Central Park outward, racing up the impossible buildings, consuming the phantom floors. Where it touched, the structures returned to their normal height. Elevators remembered their actual shafts. The skyline, while still impressive, became physically possible again. But the price was visible. Throughout the city, thousands of people collapsed as the vertical integration released them. They'd been partially transformed, like the executives, but less severe. Some had slightly elongated limbs. Others had developed that unsettling joint flexibility. They were marked by their ambition, changed by their hunger for height. They'll need help, Jennifer said, looking at the crowds of transformed people. They'll need to learn to live with what they've become. That's your job now, Director Cole said. She'd been watching the whole thing, and I could see her calculating, planning. All 5 of you. You're going to help them adapt, teach them to control it. And if we refuse, David asked, then the city tears itself apart. Look around. Thousands of people partially transformed, not understanding what happened to them. You 5 are the only ones who've been through the full change and retained your minds. Like it or not, you're the experts now. She was right. The executives, former executives, had become something new. Not corporate raiders anymore, but guides for those who'd climbed too high and needed to find their way back down. I stayed for 3 weeks helping establish what became known as the Integration Recovery Center. It operated out of the old tavern on the Green, which seemed appropriate, a place where the natural and artificial met. The 5 executives worked with the partially transformed, teaching them to control their changes to resist the call of eternal climbing. But my job was in the mountains, the real ones. I returned to the Catskills to overlook Mountain, which had been forever changed by the incident. The trail was the same, but I could feel the difference. The mountain had tasted corporate ambition and rejected it, but the memory lingered. I still work there 18 years later. I guide hikers to the ruins, which remain just ruins, stone foundations and old graffiti, nothing more. But sometimes, especially on foggy mornings, people report seeing things. A hotel that isn't there. Elevators in the trees. Meetings being held in empty air. When that happens, I call the Integration Recovery Center. One of the 5 always answers, usually Rachel. They come immediately, moving with that inhuman grace, and they help whoever has glimpsed the vertical world to step back into the horizontal one. The official story is that there was a gas leak at the executive retreat, causing mass hallucinations. The transformations were explained as a rare genetic condition triggered by altitude and stress. The building growth in Manhattan was blamed on a coordinated art project that got out of hand. Nobody really believes any of it, but it's easier than the truth. The truth is that ambition itself can become a living thing, a hunger that reshapes reality to feed itself. The truth is that 5 people climbed so high they forgot how to stop, and a burned hotel that couldn't accept its ending offered them eternal ascent. The truth is that the only cure for infinite growth is to remember that mountains have peaks, that what goes up must come down, that sometimes the greatest success is knowing when to stop climbing. I write this from my ranger station, looking up at Overlook Mountain in the morning light. The ruins are peaceful, just old stones and memories. But I know what sleeps there, what waits for the next group of ambitious souls who think the summit is just another rung on an endless ladder. The mountain knows too. It remembers everything. The hotel that was, the executives who climbed too high, the infection that almost consumed Manhattan. It holds these memories in stone and soil, a warning and a promise. Climb if you must, reach for the heights. But remember that you're human, that the earth is solid beneath your feet, that not every peak needs to be conquered. Remember that some hotels are meant to burn, some elevators aren't meant to rise forever, and some mountains are meant to be mountains, nothing more and nothing less. The Overlook Mountain House burned 3 times and was rebuilt twice. After the 3rd fire, it was finally allowed to end. But endings, I've learned, are just another kind of beginning. And in the Catskills, 90 miles from Manhattan, the mountains are always watching, always waiting, always offering you the chance to climb higher than you should. The trick is knowing when to say no. The trick is remembering that you're already high enough. The trick is being satisfied with the view from where you stand.